Welcome to the latest episode of Quest for Twice. It has been a month since I reviewed the state of the market. Given the recent fairly volatile movement of the market, especially NASDAQ, I feel this is time to refresh the view. Before I get started, I came across something very interesting and would like to share that. First, let's review a simple framework prepared by Mr. Damodaran related to buying stocks. So on this graph, it shows the intrinsic value versus price. The gap will be defined as the value minus the price. So what is intrinsic value? Intrinsic value for any company can be considered as, let's say, Warren Buffett wants to buy that company. How much money he's willing to pay for that company. And that's determined by its cash flows in the past and in the future, the growth ahead of it, and the risks to the growth and the future cash flow. So those factors will determine the intrinsic value. And the value investor see that if there is a gap between the value and the price, i.e. The company is on sale, then he or she would buy the stock with the belief that the gap will close eventually. On the other hand, a trader cares little about the value. It's all about predicting the price movement. So what affects the price of a stock? Of course, besides the underlying value of the company, there are many other factors affect the price. The price events include the momentum and the mood of the investors and the group thinking. For example, a very pessimistic view or optimistic view by the investors of the current affair or the future affairs. And also the liquidity, i.e. How much easy money is made available by the Federal Reserve. So on paper, it's very simple. If the value is greater than the price, then the company is on sale, the investor should buy it. And once the price reflects the value, then the company, then the investor can make a profit. And when the value is less than the price, that means the company stock is overvalued. Then the investor should sell the stock. However, in practice, it's very difficult to do that for a number of reasons. For example, it's extremely hard to determine what's the true intrinsic value because the value reflects the future, and the future is uncertain. The future cash flows, the future growth of any company is quite uncertain. So that is difficult to determine. Another factor to make it difficult is that the gap may take a long time to close, and there are different ways to close the gap. For example, the price can move up to match the value, or maybe the value could come down to match the price, which is especially true if the market overvalue a stock or industry. In that case, if you sell, believe that the company is overvalued and the price will come down, it may not be the case because the price in theory can stay constant. And with the growth of the company, then the intrinsic value will grow and eventually catch up to the price. And that is why it's so difficult to be a good investor. Now let's take a look at the state of the market. This chart shows the 1 year performance of major market indices. from last September to this September. So there are multiple charts, multiple lines, and they are grouped together to appreciate their relative performances. So they are all normalized at 100% in February of this year, and that's why they are all converging at 100 in February of 2020. The blue line is the NY Fund Index. I mentioned that about a month ago. The NY Fund include the major technology companies. So you can see that it had a dramatic performance from 1 year ago to now, even with a very recent major sell-off. And the white line is the S&P 500. You can see that in February of this year, its relative performance is 100. Now with the recent sell-off, it has went back to slightly below 100. What's interesting are the other two lines, the orange and the purple. The orange line is the S&P 500 subtracting the information technology sector. So in proxy, that's taking away the impact of the major technology companies on the S&P 500 performance. And that's because of the technology companies performed so well in their stock price in this year. So that is less than S&P 500 when you take away their help on the index performance of S&P 500. And the purple line is the world market index, taking away the impact of the United States. What's interesting is that this purple line and the orange line almost match each other. In other words, the impact of US stock overperformance compared to the rest of the world is almost solely driven by the technology sector. And why, as a value investor, do I care about this observation? At least because of the technology sector is the market leader in this year, and their overperformance will pull up the performance of S&P 500 and almost every stock in the United States. And on the flip side is if they have a dramatic decline, as we saw in the last 5 to 7 trading days, pull down the stock price of other stocks. So we need to pay attention to the major technology stock. Another chart I presented about a month ago was the ratio between the Fund Plus index over the Russell 2000. Russell 2000, as a reminder, is the index for the small companies. So in the past, the ratio stays almost constant, just have variations over a relatively narrow range. However, since the beginning of this year, the ratio started to climb up in a linear channel, even with the recent decline. And this upward moving channel is still not broken. And that's why the recent sell-off may not completely change the fundamental picture of the market momentum. And as an investor, we need to pay attention and see how this momentum evolves. As a value investor, I know that when the price goes up, then there is less and less chance that the company is still undervalued. Quite to the contrary, when the market index moves up, it's more likely that the market as a whole is overvalued. However, it is difficult to quantify that. That's why we look at some proxy ratios to help us understand the likelihood. On this chart, I review the price to sales ratios of a few major indices. So why do I pick sales? Because sales is considered the top line is basically how all companies, when they make money, they need to sell something, either product or a service. And when they sell it, they generate revenue and subtract the operating cost, you get the operating income. Then after you subtract the interest payment and the income tax, you get the net income. And in theory, that is profit of the company. So sales and revenue are the top line, and net income is the bottom line. That's why we care about the sales and revenue. In accounting, it's a lot easier to manipulate the net income or the profit on 1 year basis. However, the sales or the revenue is very difficult to manipulate, and it gives us a fairly reliable idea of how things are going in relative sense. So on this chart, the top one has two lines. That's the 20-year history of price over sales for two major indices. One is a NASDAQ 100, and the other one is a Russell 2000. So for the NASDAQ, it had a very high, about a ratio of 7 in 2000. So for new investors, they may not remember, but that's really the peak of the internet bubble experienced in 2000 and popped in 2001. And that's reflected by the fairly dramatic decline of NASDAQ price to sales ratio from over 7 to below 2. That's experienced in the last great recession in 2008 due to the pop of the housing bubble. Then afterwards, in the last about 10, 11 years, that the ratio gradually recovered. And but interestingly is that it stayed relatively constant between 3 and 4 in the last decade. Until recently, it exceeded 5. The last time we see the price over sales ratio over 5, you had to go back to almost 20 years in the internet bubble era to see that. Is that a common phenomenon to all the indices? Let's look at the Russell 2000. So Russell 2000, the price to sales ratio stay relatively constant in the last 20 years, hovering around 1. Another way to look at this interesting phenomena is subtract those two curves. Then you get the bottom curve. That's the difference between the NASDAQ price over sales ratio and the Russell 2000 price over sales ratio. So you can see that in 2000 2001 that difference reached about 6. Then after it popped, it stayed around 2 and with some fluctuation until recently. So it's only in this year that the difference reached to 4. And we have not seen that until about 20 years ago. So what's the rationale behind the very high price to sales ratio for NASDAQ. There could be several explanations. One of the explanation is that the price went up dramatically, and that is a fact for NASDAQ. Maybe the market is just projecting exponential growth in revenue of NASDAQ companies. Another explanation is that sales will increase modestly, but maybe the companies have a good way to hold in the cost. As a result, the net income or the profit will increase exponentially to justify the high price to sales ratio. Of course, the third explanation is that the NASDAQ 100 index is overvalued. And maybe all three factors are at play. However, it is important to keep this in perspective. So what will happen to the NASDAQ price to sale ratio in the next 1 to 3 years? If those companies become permanently, structurally more profitable with a stable or modestly more revenue, then that ratio will stay high. Otherwise, the ratio has to come down by two ways. It's either exponential sales growth that will show up in the next year or two, or the price is too high and the price will come down dramatically even with the modest sales growth. Let's review the price-earning ratio of the major tech stocks. About a month ago, I presented this table for the 4 major technology stocks: Apple, Amazon, Facebook, and Google. So with the recent major price decline of NASDAQ, I updated the price earning ratio. And you can see they hardly changed. So the conclusion I presented a month ago still stay the same. The bottom line is that the current PE ratio are very high. You have to go back to 2016, 2017 to see such a high PE ratios. And going forward, we have to see high earning growth to justify such a high PE ratio, so that then the price will not have a further decline, because the PE ratio will come down by have a drastic increase in the earning. Will that happen? Or another scenario is that the price will decline significantly if the earning growth does not materialize. Finally, let's review the performance of my quote-unquote hedge fund. In the graph, it shows the S&P 500 index performance in this year from January 1st of 2020. The up arrows are the trades I did to purchase stocks. The down arrows were the trades I did to sell stocks. And the numbers next to the arrows are the amount of money I put in normalized by my nominal salary. So 0.8 means 80% of my nominal salary. At the end of August, I bought 0.2x of Adco. In previous episode, I explained that I wanted to buy more, but felt that the market was prone to pull back because of a very greedy mentality at that time. So I only purchased 20%. And I also purchased 0.8x of Energy Transfer. I presented my investor case last week. So at $6.40 per unit price, I felt Energy Transfer presents a very attractive investment case. So with the recent market sell-off, the market price now is around $6. But I'm not concerned because of the high dividend yield near 20%. That I feel the $6.4 is a good price to buy. I was happy with my purchase. So year to date, I deployed the 2.7x of capital. And with the recent purchase of those two companies' stocks, I hold a cash position of 5%. And my profit so far is about 0.49x. And the rate of return is 18%. And my benchmark is dollar cost averaging in S&P 500. So with the recent market decline, the rate of return is 12%. So I'm still beating my benchmark. As the title of my video blog mentioned, I want to make twice of my former salary through investment. So far, my hedge fund profit is about 0.5 of my formal salary. I have some gap to close in the next 1 year and a half. So assume that my hedge fund will perform all like energy transfer with 20% return each year. Then I need to deploy 5 times of my former salary as capital. So after 1 year, the 5 times will become 6 times. And after another year, 6 times will become 7 times. Then in 2 years, I would have made twice of my former salary through investment. I currently deployed 2.7x. So to get to 5x, I need to deploy 2.3x of additional capital. My plan is to invest in additional 2 or 3 stocks to diversify and not to have all my investment in Atco or energy transfer. And hopefully they will be a good investment, and I will reach my goal in 2 years or even less. Until next time.